Mr. Marshall Crenshaw, welcome to WFMU.
Hi, Michael.
How are you?
I'm good, and it's nice to hear your voice, man.
Well, it's good to hear your voice, and on record and on telephone.
Oh, you didn't tell me when you put me on hold that I was going to have to listen to Little Wild One.
As I was listening to that song, I was thinking, boy, fake drums, but it sounds really good.
Yeah, well, again, I mean, I just heard it on the phone. I haven't heard that record in a long time, but yeah, I was kind of noticing that. We did use a Lynn drum machine on that one.
You know, it's interesting because I was going through stuff to pick, and it's very hard to pick a few Marshall Crenshaw songs to pick because there's such a great bunch of stuff, and your best of is from 2000, and it's completely outdated. You know, there's so much great music after 2000. It's time for a part two.
Thank you. Aren't you nice? Well, there is a more recent one actually. Rhino Records. They put out a 2 CD package about 6 months ago.
Really, we don't have that.
Yeah, and that one is actually pretty complete as far as the chronology.
All right, excellent. Did you have a hand in putting that together?
I did have a little bit of input, yeah. I just sort of, the tracks from the Razor and Tie, I did 3 records for this label, Razor and Tie, and those are my favorite of my records, actually, the Razor and Tie ones. And so for the Rhino thing, I chose the Razor and Tie era tracks, and I kind of left the Warner Brothers ones up to them.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So it's a double CD set, and that's out 6 months ago on Rhino. We'll have to get a copy of that. You were born in Detroit, Michigan. I assume you were a little kid in the early 60s listening to the AM radio. That's my guess.
I was born in 1953, yeah. So that's true. I was listening to the AM radio, the rock and roll radio. My dad really liked rock and roll. After World War II, he was in the Navy during the war, and after that, he kind of divided his time between Flint, Michigan, which is where his family's from, and Florida. He was going to college in Florida, and he told me that late at night he could get WLAC in both places. You know, WLAC was one of those big clear channel AM stations.
100,000
rhythm
watts.
and blues. You know, you kind of read about LAC
Right.
in a lot of rock and roll history books. And anyway, my dad was into that kind of music, and we had a close family, a lot of cousins around, a lot of teenage cousins, and so yeah, I mean, like I've always said, rock and roll music was sort of like the soundtrack of my life.
And when did someone give you a guitar?
Well, again, my dad had one, and I just started wanting to play it pretty early on. And I have a son myself, and it's really the same story with him. You know, but yeah, that was my deal. I just really liked the music, really loved it, actually.
So,
And,
well, it's kind of odd because, you know, if you listening to your music and you can sort of hear so many different influences in it, but then by the time you're sort of ready to start playing music, all of a sudden it's the mid-'70s by the time you're a teenager, and music has drastically changed.
I guess, I don't know. Looking back at, I don't know. Looking back, I don't really have a problem with 70s music anymore. But for some reason, when I got to be, when I got to be in my late teens, early 20s, it was a difficult period of my life. A lot of people have a hard time during that phase, kind of going from youth into early adulthood, I just remember that a lot of my friends were kind of having trouble with their lives and just making that transition, So yeah, I mean, I used to bitch about 70s music, just kind of like how it's like when multi-track recording came in, the sound kind of changed. You listen to records from the 50s and 60s, and it's a group, it's people playing in a room, right, And then in the 70s, it's like people not playing together so much. But, this is all kind of, I don't know where this is going. But anyway,
I'm interested. You've got my no. I agree. It's kind of an odd spot to be in. You end up somehow playing in Beatlemania. How did you get from Michigan, goofing around on your dad's guitar, to Beatlemania?
Well, I realized that when I was about 22 years old that I was, really spinning my wheels, and again, I saw a lot of my friends just kind of going off into these self-nullification kind of lifestyles, and a couple suicide attempts, and there was a lot of negativity around me. And I realized that I needed to get out of the Detroit area, or I just needed to get out of where I was and get out in the world. Like Lou Rawls says, I want to get out in the world and learn something. And that's what I needed to do. So I just kind of uprooted myself from the Detroit area. I was playing 5 nights a week in an oldies band, playing 50s and 60s rock in a bar band. And then when I decided I wanted to leave, I got this other job delivering newspapers, on the midnight shift. So I'd finish my bar band gigs, and then I'd go deliver these newspapers. I was trying to get as much money in my pocket as I could so I could get out of there. And I finally did. I went to Los Angeles with this friend of mine from high school, and then that sort of didn't take hold. I wound up having to go on the road with a band all across the West. I played in a lounge band for about 6 or 7 months, and then I wound up in New York because I got hired as an understudy in Beatlemania, and I sort of did all of that through the mail. I saw a classified ad in Rolling Stone. I sent in a tape and a picture, and so I wound up in New York, and things really started to click. Actually, as soon as I got out of the Detroit area, my life started to move in a positive direction.
So you auditioned for Beatlemania through the mail. You got hired. What was it like playing John Lennon in Beatlemania?
It was really, it was just really, that was a cool period. I remember getting to New York, and I just gotten married. So Ione, my wife, she and I arrived in New York, and it was just it was unbelievable, really. I remember going to the Winter Garden Theater and seeing the show the first couple times, and just thinking, wow, I've really, it just kind of crossed over into this other universe, and it was great. And but I got sick of being in the show pretty quickly. It was kind of a rip-off, the show, I think,